So in the first video, we saw briefly how you assess your current performance. So you look in the rearview mirror and you look at the result of what you've done. And in the second part of the chapter, we look how we assess future strategic choices. So we have not taken a decision yet, and I will briefly present some tools to help you make decisions. And again, most of it is written, so I will focus on what deserve additional voiceover, and again, you'll find some links in the body of the course to additional videos. So to assess and evaluate future strategic options, we use a very simple framework that we call the SAFE framework. So SAFE is S for suitability, A for acceptability, and FE for feasibility. And that's actually three subsequent questions that you should ask yourself, and it's only if your options go through these triple filters that it's probably a good idea to launch the activities, the actions, the project, or the full-blown strategy. So suitability, what does it mean? You ask yourself the questions: does the options, the strategy address the key opportunities and threats an organization faces? So you start from the macro environment that you've seen with Professor Crutzen in the first classes, and you ask yourself, okay, I know the key threats and opportunities of my company within my environment, and so does what I propose leverage the opportunities or miss or counteract, the threats. Then you have the acceptability filter. Okay, it makes sense, but does it meet the expectation of my stakeholder? Is it too risky or not? Will I bring the return expected? And what will be the reaction of the stakeholders? And then if the answer of those questions is yes, then you will ask you the feasibility. Okay, well, can I do it in practice? It's nice on paper, but do I have the money to do it? Do I have the people and the skills to do it? And do I have the resources that I can obtain and integrate on time? So really three questions in step. And my main focus is on the suitability, because that's where you can really use strategic tools and technique. So if we start with suitability, I've said that. So it's really, you look at your SWOT and you said, okay, do I exploit my opportunities? Do I capitalize on my strengths? And on the other hand, do I avoid threats? And do I avoid my weaknesses? And you have different tools to do that. You can use ranking, decision trees, screening, or scenario analysis. So the first three you'll see are described in this slide. So today I would like really to focus on scenario analysis, because that's a tool, quite easy, quite straightforward, but that can be quite powerful. So I will try to go through it with you so that you can have it in mind for later. So I will let you read through the ranking, and I have a clear example on Heineken. You'll see that they had several options and that they've ranked them. That's a simple decision tree. I don't do the example with you, but that's quite easy, and it enables you to structure the different strategic options. And we will zoom in on the scenario planning and analysis. So a bit of history, again, I let you read through, but it's not what it's meant to say is that it's not something new. Scenario planning exists for quite some time, and the most famous strategy is probably Sun Tzu, sorry for the pronunciation, in his famous book, The Art of War, but also Plato, and then during the war, and it's really, unfortunately, that's often during wars that people and humans are very innovative and creative, and here again, and in management, it's also true. So a lot of management techniques come from the battlefield, unfortunately. Some more recent thinker, and then Shell is actually the first company to have institutionalized scenario planning and to have developed quite advanced tools. And why? Well, just because they start realizing quite early on that their industry was meant to disappear at some point. I mean, it's still there, and you've seen the prices of oil recently. It's still there. But it's been quite a while that they've started to anticipate, and they've tried to anticipate what will arrive to the world next. And so for them to stay alive, it's very important to work with scenario. And so Shell, if you go on the Shell website, you can really find a section about scenario analysis, and they publish that, so they're really good at it. And why is scenario very important? It's because we live in a VUCA world, and you know VUCA, the acronym for volatile, complex, ambiguous, uncertain. So that's one. So I go through it, and I will explain you the methodology. That was a tool that we used at Roland Berger, so my previous company, where I've been for 10 years. And it's a very simple methodology that we could use with clients to help them enable scenarios about the future. And this methodology starts from trends. So you will work with outside trends, external trends, and then progressively you will build scenarios in 5 steps. And so I will go with you through those 5 steps. You have a summary here, and the following slides will explain each of those steps. So first one, so that's the example. That's the example we will use. It's about, and I should change the date now, but it was an example where we tried to build scenario for the future of European airline industry to 2025. And again, the current crisis will probably drastically change it, but please keep with me on that. So that's here. It's really just the example. That's to frame and structure the example. Then the first step is to identify as many external trends as possible. And to do that, you use the PESTEL or the STEEP framework. So it's the STEEP for social trends, technological trends, economic trends, environmental trends, political trends. So it's really the STEEP. And you have a lot of trends that have been identified. And how do you do that? It's through interviews, workshops, study groups, talking to people. So that's not something that you do alone in your garden, right? You need to tap into the collective intelligence of people. And I'm pretty sure that if we read those trends, at the time we did the exercise, no one ever thought about the global pandemic. So even when you thorough and you try to do scenario planning, there are always trends, risks, uncertainties that you cannot identify, and you know it by then. It's the famous black swans, right? I really recommend to read the book of Nicolas Taleb on black swans. It's quite old now, but it's more accurate than ever. So you have those trends. So that's the first step. You do that. You have the trends. Then you have the second one, is to do a perception analysis. So for each of the trends, you will ask, is it a very big risk, or is it a low risk, from 0 to 10? And you will ask that to internal people, so people inside the company you're working for, and to external people. And so you will have that kind of graph, with for each trend identified the likelihood, the level of risk, the level of uncertainty. And for some of them, you will see that there is a gap. That's a blind spot between what people internally said and what people externally said. And that's really important, because when you have a blind spot, that's probably something you should look at. And it's because you're biased, it's sometimes because you're biased internally. So that's the second step. Then you will do a very classical trend and uncertainty analysis. So you will plot all the trends in that kind of matrix with their level of uncertainty and the potential impact of them. And so it will give you that kind of graph. So you see that the first one, the geopolitical stability, but the level of uncertainty, it's really high. You don't know what's going to happen. And when we did the survey, it was quite likely to happen. And so it's ranked there. And so it enables you to map all your trends and to highlight the one that are really critical. That's what we call the critical uncertainties. And that's the one that will appear here. You have the given. The given, they are not really uncertain. They are quite likely, and you know that the impact will be big. So those ones, they are given. You need to take them into account, but you're pretty sure that you can prepare for them. Those ones, even if they are quite certain, they have a low impact, so they are not too important. So the one that you should focus on is those ones. Potentially a big impact and very uncertain. Those are the black swan. The COVID would have been here. A pandemic would have been here, really on the top right corner, and you see here no one predicted it. So that's not perfect, right? And then the fourth step, that's you start building scenario, and that's a bit the less rational part of the method is that you will take the critical uncertainties. So what you find here, that's all the critical uncertainties, and you will try to find two axes with those critical uncertainties. So here you can, two persons with the same critical uncertainties could come with different axes. So here, when we did it, we group the critical uncertainties into two main axes. The trends related to regulation and the one related to price. And then we use that for the last step. It was to define the two axes here. So you see that axis that was decreasing price or increasing price, and here it was open regulation or closed regulation. But you could probably have come with other axes, and that's also the beauty of the exercise. And what does that do? By doing that now, you have four different worlds that are basically the combination of the two axes. So I told you in strategy consulting we love those 2x2 matrices. That's a bit simple, but it enables you to simplify a complex problem and still to come with a lot of ideas. And so as a company, if you do that, and you could imagine doing it for your future startup, for example, but then it forces you to prepare yourself for each of those worlds. Each of the square of the rectangles here, that's a different world. And so you need to be prepared to act if any of those scenario happen. And that's really here, you start describing the scenario in each world. And of course, at some point you will need to choose for one, but it's important to keep monitoring the others. So that was scenario. I know I've been probably a bit fast. That's a pity that we are not together, but read through it. It's quite simple, and it's really a powerful tool. So then you have the acceptability, and there you will really look, is my strategy acceptable compared to the three R's, in terms of risk, in terms of returns, and in terms of reaction of stakeholder. So I'll let you read it, but it's a lot of notions that you know. But the value here is obviously to apply theoretical concept that you've seen in some other class, mainly in finance, and to put them in perspective to strategic decision. What's my payback period? What are my discounted cash flow? And here you don't do it just for the beauty of it, but you do it to assess real options that you have in front of you. And of course, stakeholders, you can have many different stakeholders, so you need to define them. This, I will not go through it today. And then the feasibility. And feasibility, again, three aspects. You will look, is it financially feasible? Do I have the fund to do it? Can I generate the cash flow that are required to sustain the strategy? Then do I have the people and the skills? And do I have the right people? Do I need to train them? Do I have the right organization? Do I have the right reward structure? And then there is the integration of resources. So here you will touch about all the other means that needed to launch a project. Think about IT, infrastructure, how can you integrate all this? So that's really the feasibility dimension. Usually, if you dare, you can tell me, well, it's maybe better to start with this one before the suitability and the adaptability. Yes, you're right, but let's say that it's more a final check. So that's probably something that you do already in the beginning, so you have a good sense of, is it financially feasible and do I have the people? But it's good to close the loop at the end and to really assess the feasibility of a strategy. And then you have some final comments. So I will not just read myself. So everything is written. I think it's pretty clear. And so I have 1 minute. So I would like to thank you to have listened, for the one who have listened to all the videos. And I know it will not be the majority, but thank you for those who have done it. I would have really preferred and loved to be with you and to explain that face to face. I can imagine that it's not the funniest to do that remotely. But anyway, I've done my best to provide you with as many material as possible for this course. Additional reading, additional video, and I have two last here that are not directly related to the class, but those are from two professors that I had during my MBA and that I really loved. So they inspired me a lot. So I've put their video here. So if you have some time, if you're now to stay locked in your house, don't hesitate to look at those two videos. So it's Daniel Deneuve about fat-free strategy, and it's Hitendra Patel about democratizing innovation. So do not hesitate to have a look. Thank you. Bye bye.